In our world today, this idea of embracing oneself just as we are has been normalized more than ever. What does the Bible say on this, and how should we deal or overcome it? I'm a struggling Christian who is in love with a same-sex partner. I know it's written in the Bible that same-sex intercourse is immoral, but what about same-sex love? Doesn't everyone deserve to love and be loved by someone regardless of gender?
So married life is out, Brother Edwin. Does that mean like being a father as well? Do you have plans of adopting, or just is that totally out of the picture also?
Ako, may time ba tayo? Maganda yung question mo on fatherhood, actually.
Is a person born gay? You know, and is there any scientific basis to this? How do we help our loved ones to live a life of chastity in a non-preachy way? If a girl pursued you, are you open to being in a heterosexual relationship?
Ako talaga
Ako na sasagot, di ba, Brother Edwin?
Hello? Hello?
Podcast Network Asia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Narrow Door podcast. This is part 2 of a conversation that we are having with Brother Edwin Valles. Brother Edwin is the president of Courage Philippines. Courage Philippines is a Catholic apostolate for persons experiencing same-sex attraction. He is also the host of a podcast called Be Not Afraid, which features the journey of our brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ plus community. They're journeying through the faith with this struggle. You can watch that on YouTube. Welcome back, Brother Edwin.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. So, I think we had a very good conversation, I hope. No? So, dun sa first part of this interview. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your life. I mean, it's wonderful. We love it. And now, are you ready? For this is the listener series. Listener's question series.
But for those of you guys who are listening to this without having heard Brother Edwin's story first, we highly suggest that you do that, so you also have an idea what Brother Edwin's story is, and how he got to being president of Courage Philippines. So please do that.
Parang mas meaningful, really, guys, if you listen to the first part before you get to this part of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, as promised, this is the second installment where we are now going to get to our listener questions. And people have a lot of things that they're curious about. And I thought maybe this would be a good place to start. This is coming from Vanessa, who watches us from North Carolina, US of A.
Well, global. We just went global, you guys.
And she would like to ask, how do you overcome homosexuality? In our world today, this idea of embracing oneself just as we are has been normalized more than ever. What does the Bible say on this, and how should we deal or overcome it?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Vanessa. So, by the way, Courage originated from the US, so where she's from. So anyway, very important. I think magaling she asked that question about parang embracing who we truly are. So then it really is a question of identity. So I think we covered that in the first part of the episode. So yun na nga. There was a phase in my life that I identified myself as gay, and then by some grace of God, he through a priest, so I was introduced to a different sense of identity, that of a child of God, so a son of God. So in that sense, so if we recognize, diba, if we meditate on the meaning of us being children of God, no, or being a son and daughter of God, then we can really truly embrace what that means. No? So you're in its full glory, so to speak. So then parang we understand that our life is about conformity to the Son of God Himself, Jesus Christ, diba? And trying to have a relationship with Him. Then, I hope I answered that question. So it depends really on the sense of identity kasi. So tama naman yun. A human person flourishes as soon as they embrace parang who they truly are. So, ang question yan, but who are we truly are? Tama ba yung grammar na?
Yes. So, I understand.
Yeah. So, and if I may, no, so in terms of the Catholic teaching on it, diba? So 1986 pa lang, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith already said na the church refuses to call human persons heterosexual or homosexual because this way of calling human person is a reductionist reference to the human person. So it has a capacity to reduce a person based on their sexual attraction or gender identity or their sexual action. So the human person is always bigger than all of these. So no matter how powerful our feelings are, who we truly are is always bigger than our emotions. So very important yun na. And this is a very key understanding of the human person that the church proposes, di ba? So since time immemorial. So the person is always bigger.
So her question touched on the Bible as well. And we know that scripture has been a huge part of your journey. What do you have any verses in mind that you kind of hold on to, or maybe that really like hit home for you, I suppose?
Nay, marami masyado. Sabi, pagbili nag-jam sila para wala tuloy yung maalala ngayon. Yeah, so many. I think the way that the Bible has become part of my life is really, it's an integral part of my prayer. So lagi siyang nagiging platform for my meditation. So in that context, there's just too many passages.
Absolutely. So, but was it more like the verses that talked about God's love and
Sure.
How we are God's children and that identity that you were talking about, like those things? I ask this because two-pronged. Number one, do we believe, is the church teaching on this that same-sex attraction when carried out is a sin because there are verses in the Bible that state that? And the other question is, I bring it up because our next question has something to do with that. I didn't even know that clobber verses were even a thing. Yes. So our next listener actually points out that these clobber verses, which are verses that talk about homosexuality being a sin, now being used against these people to, be prejudiced against them, which in itself to me is wrong. That's not the church teaching. Now we will use Bible verses to, spew hatred on a certain group of people.
Sure. Yeah, but to that listener's point, no? So in fact, Christian groups have used that. No? So they've used Bible passages to condemn the homosexual act. No? So syempre may pinanggagalingan din yung question yan. Pero I think, so definitely, what the church upholds as true will be parang the fullness of revelation. No? So yung scriptures for sure play a part on that. No? Pero marami kasing pinanggagalingan yung teaching on homosexuality. So the church was not created because it's preaching against homosexual act. No? So yung understanding niya of the condition of homosexuality is based on siguro parang loftier or parang wider understanding of the human person first, di ba? Na parang na human person is much bigger than the sexual attraction. And second, on reflection and based on revelation on the sexual act, no? So yung whole sexual ethics kasi needs to be understood clearly. So based on revelation and even Jesus Christ, di ba? So yung one of the passages na about teaching on divorce, di ba? So some of the leaders of the parang Jewish leaders at the time asked him, parang what do you make of the teaching of divorce? Kasi Moses allowed this divorce. Sabi niya, this was not so from the very beginning, di ba? So kaya lang inallow ni Moses and because of the hardness of your heart. Pero yung from the very beginning, yung God's plan for sexuality is beautiful, it's grand, and it's for the full flourishing of the human person. So ever since, di ba? So Adam and Eve, di ba? Parang there's always that complementarity of sexes, even how the body is designed, di ba? So lahat ng systems of the body are complete in themselves. Diba? So ako, my respiratory system is sufficient so that I can function well, diba? I can breathe. Except the reproductive system. So yung reproductive system, it is not complete parang by an individual. So you need another person. So yung reproductive system for it to be to be reproductive needs the other part, di ba? So yung complementary part. No? So laging ganun eh. So based on revelation, again, the teachings of Jesus Christ on love, on kailan ginagamit yung sexual faculties, and also yung when it comes to the revelation in terms of the body. No? So yung sexual act is a sacred gift from God, and it is reserved, di ba? So it is best used within the sanctity of marriage between one man and one woman. So yun yung teaching. Mm-hmm. So, and because that is the teaching, all sexual activities outside the sanctity of marriage between one man and one woman is considered a sin. Hindi lang homosexuality yan for sure.
Yes.
So, you have extramarital affairs is mostly heterosexual, but it's wrong, di ba? It is a sin. Adultery is a sin, di ba? Pornography is a sin. Masturbation is a sin. Rape is a sin, di ba? So, prostitution is a sin. Diba? Most of these, aside from homosexuality, are heterosexual in nature, at least based on the Philippine experience. But yung heterosexuality alone does not make it right. No? So we need to understand that. So there is a proper use of the sexual act because it is a sacred gift. And the reason why we know it's a sacred gift because it produces life. No? So yun. So yun. So yun yung revelation. Diba? And there are many there are many passages in the Bible that support that revelation. So, yan. So, doon ang gagaling yung teaching of homosexuality. And specifically to the passages in the Bible that address directly the homosexual act. Sodom and Gomorrah is one of them. The LGBT advocates call them the clobber passages. Kasi nga naman, ginagamit nga naman ng mga taong simbahan yan to parang, hoy, mali yung ginagawa nyo. Diba? Pero, and there are also theologians, diba? Parang queer theologians who would rather read the scriptures from a queer reading, no? So pero as ano to, siguro as academic scriptural work go, no, that's not actually the most stringent of academic standards. No? So yung overwhelming majority of scripture scholars, even putting it in the context of how it was written, what was the milieu at the time, support and affirm the teachings of the church on sexuality and even homosexuality. So, so may mga theologians naman who offer a different interpretation, sure, but it doesn't make it right. So,
so I guess parang my takeaway from that is like, yes, there's scripture and it, but it's not the only basis of why Correct. We teach on this the way we do.
And the teaching is not against homosexuality per se, di ba? The teaching is because of the sacredness and the beauty of the sexual act. So, yeah, ayun yung context niyan. So,
got it. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, John. Let's move on to our next question. This comes from Tracy. She says, I'm a struggling Christian who is in love with a same-sex partner. I know it's written in the Bible that same-sex intercourse is immoral, but what about same-sex love? Doesn't everyone deserve to love and be loved by someone regardless of gender? I just find it unfair that heterosexuals can freely love who their hearts choose. Why can't it be the same for homosexuals? In the end, we are all humans and have the same feelings. I believe that these feelings exist for a reason. This,
very complex yung question and very packed.
And I can certainly relate to where she's coming from, because this is hard teaching, and yeah, why can't we just love? Like, I mean, as long as we're not hurting other people. What's your take on this, Brother Edwin?
Yeah, so tama naman, no? So let's start with parang what was that? So yung action is the one that is considered a sin, no? For sure. So then parang we talk about that emotion, and specifically dun sa nagtanong, parang she's a female, no? So even in courage and even among my gay friends, no? So I remember yung meron kaming, so in my gay barkada, we have a lesbian couple, no? So I think they were together for 10 years, and talagang parang yung they were living in together for 10 years, and then yung arrangement nila was talagang sleeping together besides that. Parang, pero yung, according to both of them, they could count the sexual action between the two of them for like, parang in one side. Parang isa ko, lahat kami parang lang ng mga gay friends, 10 years kayo magkasama. Parang, and based also on the experience of Courage Sisters, parang talagang for women, it tends to be more emotional connection. So, rather than the sexual act itself. So, and tama naman yun, di ba? So, siguro yung, ang hirap kasi, maraming layers, ano, diba? So, siguro ang goal na lang talaga na, and I'll tie it in with, ano ba yung teaching ng church when it comes to, para how is yung mga sexual activity outside the sanctity of marriage best addressed. No? So, yung going back to the question before, yung teaching. Kasi nga, yung teaching talaga, yung sexual activities is reserved for a man and a woman in sanctity of marriage. So all sexual activities outside this is considered a sin or a manifestation of lust. No? So, lahat yan, marami yan. Diba? So, yung understanding ng simbahan when it comes to the use of sexual faculties, including yung sexual energies outside the sanctity of marriage, is considered lust. No? So, sin of lust. So, yung opposite niyan is a virtue, which is chastity. So, kaya yung universal call to all is to be chaste. No? So, yun din yung first goal ng courage. Pero yung chastity kasi, you need to understand, it's a journey. And it is a journey of affective maturity. No? So, then we're trying to tie it in also dun sa first part of this interview na when we talk about, yung concern kasi ng LGBT person is affective in nature. No? So, it's a symptom of a broken heart, to borrow from an author. No? So, therefore, parang ang goal talaga is to be mature in affection, means to be healed in that deep woundedness, to be healed of that broken heart. No? So, yun, sometimes, di ba, parang it could be na yung emotional connection that we have right now, siguro is the best solution, di ba? Parang to fill in that deep need, di ba? Pero parang but maybe we need to also consider that maybe God has better plans for it. So that maybe we can approach a relationship not from a feeling of depravity, di ba? Of being hurt, but rather from a place of healing, from a place of fullness, di ba? In full freedom. So, masyado bang indirect yung pagsagot ko? Pero kasi I think that's the best way, di ba? So, we need to understand yung emotional need ko pa for the same sex. Is it driven by fear? Is it driven by such emotional neediness? Di ba? Parang na hindi pa siya fully free, di ba? Or full-bodied love of the person for who they truly are. No? So, independent of what I'm going through. Diba? So, yun ang mga questions that we need to answer. Diba? So it's really not a clear-cut answer kasi I also understand na yung maturation of affection takes time. No? So, what that person is seeing now may not be the full picture. Diba? So,
hypothetically speaking, Brother Edwin, like say there are two people and, they're both deeply rooted in the faith, but they are experiencing the same-sex attraction and they make a commitment not to consummate this romantic relationship and they will be chaste, but, in a loving romantic relationship. Is that still against church teaching?
Yeah, so hypothetically. So I will have to answer it kasi mahirap yung hypothetical. But anyway, so yun na nga, if they have a loving relationship and they're not acting in it sexually, then that relationship is really not a romantic relationship. It's not marriage, but friendship. So, diba? So kailangan siya, so parang kailangan magkaroon ng full maturation of friendship between these two persons. So, nagets nyo? So, yun yung diba? So, kasi yung romantic feelings, diba? So, it necessarily leads to marriage. Diba? So, yun, kumbaga, hindi naman, yung romantic feeling is not an end in itself, diba? So, it always is leading towards that lifetime commitment, diba? In the sanctity of marriage, diba? So, whereas yung friendship, it is a relationship that is an end in itself, no? So, could be an end in itself, no? So, it is for its own good, diba? So, yun. So, these two persons can love each other as friends because they're not having sex anyway. Diba? So, sure. And that is the fourth goal of courage, chaste friendship. So, when the church accompanies LGBT persons, for sure, the church recognizes the deep need of every person to have that intimate connection with others. Diba? We are all humans. Lahat tayo meron tayong need for that. No? So, and it is encouraged, in fact, through chaste friendship. Sure. Diba? So, yun na, fourth goal din ng courage. So, it is important. Pag sinabi ng simbahan na you have to be chaste, it doesn't mean na pag-chastity belt ka, diba? Ikukulong ka sa kwarto, i-isolate. Hindi ganun. Naka-lockdown ka forever. Hindi ganun yung chastity, diba? So, kasi ang goal ng chastity is affective maturity so that you can in fact give of yourself to others with a full-bodied and fully free love. So authentic and genuine.
Speaking of chastity, we do have an episode coming up on that because we have a listener, who is just his observation of like the hookup culture that is around us nowadays, and what do we do when we want a meaningful relationship that is chaste? How do we go about that in 2021, right? So yeah.
And belt lang din yung alam ko, Sam.
Gosh, yeah, it's really not as simple as it sounds. Na parang, I just won't do anything sexual with the person. Edi okay na.
But even yung listener who asked that question, kasi marami pang layers doon, diba? So, and parang we're missing those layers, those contexts, diba? So ang hirap talaga siya sagutin directly, diba? So, but we try our best. So,
yes. Tracy, so you can directly message lang, Brother Ed.
Or, I think she can definitely get in touch with Courage Philippines.
Sure,
and talk to other people who are experiencing this and listen to
we have a women's chapter actually. So, na-recognize namin ako personally, di ba, as president, na iba rin talaga yung pinagdadaanan ng women. So, parang I think it's very presumptive of me to assume na what I've been through is also what the women members are going through. So,
But Brother Edwin, does it make you sad that you cannot have a conventional family?
Siguro parang na-solve ko na yan even before I joined Courage. I think when I was in my mid-30s, I've realized for myself na I think I'm not meant for the married life. So, parang marami ako pinagdaanan dyan, di ba? Siyempre, parang like everybody else, I pine for a loved one, na parang I also dreamed of forever, di ba? Pero, but also, siguro it's a process of learning and experiencing, also yung self-awareness, no? Parang siguro comparing myself to my friends who are married already or are in a relationship, parang think ko, parang yung traits nila I don't share with them. Marami siyang intangibles, no? So very complicated yan, di ba? So mid-30s pa lang ako, I've already discerned na I'm not called for the married life, di ba? So neither am I called for the priestly life, di ba? Sa religious life. So talagang back then, parang single blessedness. And then, courage came. No? So, siguro mas na-affirm lang yung call na yun, yung vocation na yun.
Yeah. Okay.
So, married life is out, Brother Edwin. Does that mean like being a father as well? You have plans of adopting or just, is that totally out of the picture also?
Ako, may time ba tayo? Maganda yung question mo on fatherhood, actually.
Yes!
Hindi kasi, so this is what happened. So when I got involved in the Courage Ministry, so 2014, I think off the bat, yung mga missionaries of charity, yung mga kay Mother Teresa na community, they will do kasi doon sa mga poor barangays. So nagbabarangay immersion sila. And they found mga several teenage boys na flamboyant, mga gay persons. So ginawa nila, ginagather nila sila once a month in their center. And then they would invite us, kaming mga Courage officers, to spend time with them. Diba? So when I went there the first time, lahat sila parang naka-blouse, naka-makeup, mga ganun. Parang ang goal ko noon was, I wanna do this ministry once a week. Tiga Makati ako sa Antipolo yun. So once a month I'd go there to Antipolo. Kasi parang yung goal ko noon was to talk to my teenage self. Alam mo yan, yung ganun, because I was like them when I was while I was their age. But after a while of doing that, siguro mga 2 to 3 years, kasi normally yung mga madre will host lunch. Yung isang madre, a Japanese madre, approached me and told me na, parang, I have observed that the way you deal with them is that you're very fatherly to them. So, parang na-surprise ako dun sa comment na yun. Kasi ako naman, actually, feeling ko, it was very for selfish reasons that I was doing it. No? Parang, I wanted to talk to my teenager self. Pero, parang, siguro yun, parang that is how God has his ways, no? So parang I never thought of myself or this ministry as a fatherhood ministry. But he did it anyway. God made it that way anyway. No? So yung my presence to them, 'di ba? My care to them appeared very fatherly to them. Did I answer your question? Pero
Wow.
kasi ganun siya eh. So even if I discerned na hindi ako for married life and I dedicated myself to the service to the church, God will render it fruitful anyway. So yung fruitfulness of masculinity is in fatherhood, diba? As motherhood is for femininity, diba? So and through ministry, He allowed me to experience that. So and feel ko na parang yun, it's an unintended goal, diba? But
that's
God
beautiful.
gave it anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. No, kasi parang si Eric Erickson kasi yun, my age, yung mga 40s, yung need talaga yung my age is need for generativity. Diba? So, yung this decade became parang siguro it was a meaningful but also an easy decade for me. Kasi yung model ni Eric Erickson, there's a tension, diba? So, a tension between generativity or non-generativity. So, but it became easy for me because of Courage Ministry. So, yung need ko for generativity was fulfilled through ministry.
Pero I mean, but like if you really did want to adopt a child, is that something that you could do?
Hindi ko alam by law, no? So, I think actually I'm not too familiar with yung adoption laws in the Philippines. No? So, okay. I suppose it's possible because I have a gay friend who has adopted a daughter. No? So, yeah. Pero kasi hindi ko rin siya na-discern for myself. So, to take care of a child.
Yeah.
Especially at my age. No? Para hindi ko na siya mabubuhat. Hindi ako nag-slip disc.
How are you now? Dog, Brother Edwin.
How old are you now anyway?
I have 9 cats.
You have 9 cats?
In our house.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
There's a start.
Let's move on to our next question. This one is coming from Joanne and John. And their question has to do with, is a person born gay? And is there any scientific basis to this? Is their question, which, the nature versus nurture debate, correct, right?
So, to date, parang there's no scientific consensus on this, diba? So, in fact, progressively through the years, na-disprove yung born this way theory or yung most recent kasi, I think 2019, if I'm not mistaken, yung gene theory, diba? Parang kasi yun yung pinapropose ng isang group, no, na parang it can be found in a gene or there's a gay gene. It has been disproved, no? So there's no such thing as a gay gene. If at all, genes, yung influence on sexuality is almost parang negligible, napakaliit lang talaga. So parang, and even in our past experience with Courage, talagang we tend to see yung impact of nurture, so in the process. So we need to understand kasi yung sexuality is a very complex human experience. No? So parang to reduce it to biology, it just doesn't make sense. No? So parang hindi niya maka-capture yung complexity of the human experience as sexuality.
Yeah. And I heard this one argument na parang if it were in a gene that was passed down, that was inherited, but people who experience same-sex attraction, even if they're married, like they're not going to reproduce. So it's not passed down,
Correct. Yes.
Right. So how do we come to that conclusion that this is in a gene?
Yeah, correct. Prior to the 2019 study, yung ginagawa is yung twin studies. No? So they studied yung mga, ano ba yung parehong-pareho yung gene? Congenital ba o yung fraternal? Congenital ata yun. Sorry, nakalimutan ko yung size. But yung twin na...
Identical.
Identical twin. No? So sila yung from the same egg and diba? Na nag-split, diba? So parehong-pareho sila ng DNA, diba? Pero nung inaaral nila yung mga twins na ganyan, so kung ganon, kung pareho sila ng DNA and genetics, therefore, if one twin is gay, the other should also be gay, no? Pero wala. Parang maliit lang yung conformity nun. So, hindi siya statistically significant. Right? Sorry, I can't remember the figure na, but it's not statistically significant. So
Okay, yeah. This by far was the most asked question on this topic, and it has to do with how we can help our loved ones to live a life that is chaste in a non-preachy way. That's coming from Luigi. Other versions of this question went like, how do I better communicate with them to make them feel like, hey, it's okay, we can talk about this. That's coming from Mitch. How do I relate or love a family member who has a partner from the same gender? I'm sorry, are these all different questions to you?
I think different questions, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Maybe we can start with the first one. How do we help our loved ones to live a life of chastity in a non-preachy way?
Correct. So first, when we're specifically talking about chastity, first you have to be a witness first, no? Obviously. Diba? So, kung ikaw lalaki, for example, nang bababae ka, and then you're trying to accompany an LGBT person not to be chaste, then you're not a credible witness. So, and so on and so forth. So, yan. So, witnessing talaga is very important. Yun yung pinaka, yung often quoted is parang na preach, use words if necessary. No? So,
I love that
yung
quote,
by our very witness, we are actually preaching chastity. So, yan. So, first, second, talagang consider effective approaches. No? So, more than correction, more than doctrine, more than behavioral approaches, consider yung mga effective approaches. So, yung listening, presence, being more affirming on the person, so not necessarily the homosexual behavior. So, be more affirming of the person, yung good qualities of the person, being there for them where they're down, di ba? So, being, yung talagang, trying to fill their affective need, diba? So kailangan ba sila, may trust issue ba sila? Be a trustworthy person. Meron ba silang abandonment issue? Then be present for them. So and so on and so forth. So yeah. So I think yun yung two important points.
And yeah, you're right. You got to walk the talk, You can't just give them the talk about what they should do. Absolutely.
Tapos iba naman yung pinapakita mo.
Correct.
Oo, diba?
So, nanonood tayo ng porn, diba? Parang, ay.
Okay. Is that related to how do I better communicate with them to make them feel like, hey, it's okay, we can talk about this? Is that connected to like the affective?
Correct, yun. Correct. Sadly, sa Courage, maraming mga naka-experience ng sexual molestation when they were young. So, normally, maraming impact on the person. Pero one of the impact is yung trust. No? So, nabe-break yung trust. So, yun. So, maybe the need of the LGBT person is parang to learn how to trust again. Diba? So, be a trustworthy friend. No? So, so in that sense, to that point. No? So, kasi yung context of the question was, it's okay to have a dialogue. Diba? Pero, kung in the past, di ba, kung ano pinag-usapan mo, chinismis mo naman sa ibang tao, di ba? So, di ba, parang, you have to be a trustworthy person for them to open up, diba? And a lot of the times what they've gone through is very painful, diba? Very personal and intimate, diba? So you have to be that one person na they can share that intimate story with, diba? So
got it.
And isn't it true, Brother Edwin, most of these victims also, the reason why it's so hard for them to trust is because yung gumawa sa kanilang masama is normally a family member.
Correct. Research back yan. 9 out of 10 cases are done by people children trust or within the immediate circle. Akala natin molestation, di ba? Parang may tarantadong tao randomly na magmomolest siya ng anak na. But no, 9 out of 10. And even in the Philippine context, we all know, no? So I think a vast majority of Filipinos live in extended family setups, no? So so maraming cases na ganyan. So I think several of my Courage brothers, tito nila mismo ang nagmolest, no? So their uncles. So
yeah. Our next question goes, this is from Alyssa. She says, how do I relate or love a family member who has a partner from the same gender? So this person is now living out the same-sex attraction. how do we relate to them or love them?
Yeah, so yeah. Again, even yung family relationship is another complexity, no? So, I mean, kapag naka-summarize yung question, madali na magsabi na answer, pero we all know na yung family relationship dynamics is much more complicated than that, diba? So, even yung among siblings, yung parang parent and child, so it tend to be emotionally charged, yung relationship na yun. So, yun, I suppose talagang continue to be that person, that lifeline of that loved one. No? So, yun. So, just be affirming of the person, di ba? So, and if you're a faithful Catholic, parang talagang siguro charitably let yourself known when asked, di ba? So, what do you think of the situation? So, parang to proclaim, di ba? And try to make the other person understand why you feel that way, di ba? So, and why the church thinks that way. So, but parang without losing that connection with that loved one. So, continue to be the lifeline for that person. By the way, magsisegue rin ako na. So, in yung Courage Apostolate kasi, meron siyang tinatawag na one community known as Encourage. So, this is the support group para doon sa mga tao na yung loved ones nila are LGBT persons. So, we're talking about parents, siblings, sometimes spouses, no? So, or friends of mga LGBT persons. Grabe naman yung maternity ng spouses. Parang I think may mga cases na ganyan.
Oh yeah, it's
I
not
think you have
unheard of.
encountered already.
Yes.
With some, wala pa?
No, I mean, like I've heard of a few, but I just didn't think that it would be like a big number para, alam mo yun, to be part of Courage.
And so Encourage yung tawag sa kanila. So they also meet once a month. So talagang they share about their experiences, their pain, their struggles. No? So kasi syempre conflicted din sila. Alam nila yung Catholic teaching and then but they also love their loved ones. No? So ang hirap talaga. I mean, sa totoo lang mahirap maging parent, mahirap managigate yan. So it all boils down on a case-to-case basis. So lagi siyang contextualized.
But that's wonderful that Courage has a support group for that too.
Yes.
Because obviously, a lot of the questions that we got was really about that.
Correct.
You know, as a person who knows someone who has same-sex attraction, how do I be there for them while also not compromising what we believe and what the church teaching is and not turn them off or come off judgy.
Yes.
You know? Yeah.
So
I have
actually,
a question,
sorry, go ahead.
Brother Edwin, what about people who say they're bisexuals?
Okay,
like,
what about them?
No, I mean, like kasi diba, they would practice the same-sex attraction and then pagsawa na sila, babalik sila dun sa regular programming. Regular programming. No, have you guys have you dealt with that sa Courage? Like, you know, like they're self-professed, oh, I'm a bisexual. How do I deal with this?
Okay. Mahirap ako sumagot kasi I used to be parang LGBT advocate. So, I mean, my experience as a gay man, no? So, again, without dissing the experiences of mga bisexual persons, feeling ko kasi it's just a matter of time, di ba? So, eventually, but that is my experience, di ba? So, alam ko yung ganitong opinion nakaka-cancel in social media. Pero, I mean, that's just my experience. Again, I come from a different generation of LGBT parang times. So, pero, I mean, but parang according to research din, wala talagang tao na clear split na 50-50 na gets mo. So
choice lang nila yun pala, brother.
Yeah. So, meron talagang one that is more dominant. Diba? So, yeah, very, very rarely yung talagang clearly split na 50-50. So, in that particular context, then yung bisexual person, yung people who identify as bisexual is journeying through their identity as well. So, and actually, yun din naman yung belief ng LGBT advocacy na yung gender identity and sexual attraction is fluid across a lifetime. So, that's what they preach.
I think this was answered in the previous episode or this one earlier. I'm not sure, but Jay wanted to know, if a girl pursued you, are you open to being in a heterosexual relationship?
Ako talaga, so
Ako na
parang
sasagot, di ba, Brother Edwin?
parang for me, the boat has sailed, di ba? So, kasi malayo na narating ng boat. So,
Aayusan ka na nga lang daw niya.
but that's my case, ha? So, in Courage, so naabutan ko na when I joined Courage, merong dalawang Courage brothers who actually married. So, they have wives, they have children na nga. Diba? So, it's really a case-to-case basis. So,
Right. So this last question comes from Perry, and he asks, Western LGBTQ plus agenda has permeated the Philippine culture. How do we respond to that? First of all, what does he mean by Western LGBTQ plus agenda? What does that mean?
yeah, so actually, so talaga naman nangyayari sa West. So, siguro we begin with the context of the West. So bakit ba nagkaroon ng LGBT movement in the West? Kasi there's a history of violence talaga. So yung watershed moment for that movement is yung 1969 sa in New York, no? So Stonewall riots, no? So in their law, yung homosexual action is a criminal action, di ba? So people were jailed for it. Wala tayong ganong context sa Pilipinas. So when I used to be active in the LGBT movement in the Philippines, so papansin ko rin yan, parang konti lang yung mga activists dito, di ba? But yung general LGBT person, hindi naman ganun ka-politicized. No? So we do not share that same political intensity as the West. No? So, and also, second criticism na for mga Catholic faithful, feeling talaga nila mga Amerikano tayo, di ba? So, lahat, di ba? Parang whatever happening is the US, feeling nila ganun yung nangyayari sa Philippines, no? So, without discounting the fact that American culture exerts an influence on Philippine culture, I think we need to discern and understand what is going on in the LGBT movement within the Philippine context. So, in the Philippine context, family is important. Diba? Within the family, within the Philippine context, hindi naman talaga majority yung mga talagang advocates about it. In fact, yung mga interviews, or parang thirdly, in the Philippine context, hindi naman talaga overall, no? Parang overwhelmingly negative yung experience with the church. So, yung survey recently, sinabi na yung mga majority of the LGBT persons in the Philippines put a premium on their faith, no? So, hindi yan kagaya sa states na talagang na-traumatized by the evangelical approach that is very hostile to homosexuality, diba? So, iba yung konteksto natin, diba? So, I think I saw a video clip before na sinurvey din yung mga same-sex couples. Most of them, sabi niya, ayaw naman namin ng same-sex marriage, diba? So, okay na kami lang, diba? So, yung gano'n, so it's just a very different context. So we need to look at it, diba? Discern and act accordingly in the Philippine context.
Brother Edwin, I want to thank you so much for, again, being so open, answering these questions. They were not easy questions. Do you have anything that you want to say that wasn't addressed with the Q&A that we just had?
Siguro tayo team ipopromote ko na yung podcast ko.
So, please do.
By yung CBCP Media decided to come up with parang mga podcasts, no, on various Catholic topics. And just to prove to you that the church truly cares about LGBT person, they gave a podcast to talk about parang mga LGBT issues. So they asked me to host it. And nasabi ko lang sa kanila, I wanted that podcast to be different. Diba? Kasi yung typical Catholic narrative on LGBT is judgment or what is wrong about it, etc. But I wanted it to be a listening podcast. So, in fact, there are many LGBT persons who choose or who love the church so much and who are journeying through their faith. So that is the goal of the podcast. And siguro yun na rin yung parting words. By the way, I'd like to say hi to my editor and director, si Brother Nico. Sabi niya, greet ko daw. So when he found out that I'll be guesting here. So anyway, what that podcast stands for is what the church truly is. No? So when it comes to its desire to accompany LGBT persons, yun talaga yung authentic desire ng church na whatever you're going through, papakinggan kita. Diba? Whatever you're going through, I'm here for you. Diba? So whatever you need, I will provide it for you. Diba? So, but come to me, diba? Draw to me. Diba? Ayun, parang learn from me also. So, yun. So, yun lang yung, and I hope mga listeners of this podcast who are experiencing same-sex attraction or have gender identity confusion, bear that in mind. The church is a mother. So, but aside from being a mother, the church is also a teacher. So, draw to her, diba? And also try to learn from her.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you again for joining us. And the title of Brother Edwin's podcast is Be Not Afraid. And you can watch this on YouTube in a channel called Faith Watch. And I think the most eye-opening thing for me perhaps is that this is a much, much complex struggle than we realize. And that was also the reason why I really felt like I needed to have this conversation with somebody who knew what this experience was like. And yeah, I hope that our listeners, through these conversations that we've had, have a better understanding of what the church's heart is, what God's heart is in all of this. And really the call is for us to love them and accompany them. That's a word that the church uses for this, to listen. And so I really want to thank you for sharing your journey with us, Brother Edwin. Thank
you for listening to my story. So this podcast has actually done that, yung accompaniment, yung listening.
And we hope to have you back, Brother Edwin.
Sure.
Updates lang, diba?
Sige.
Thank you.
I would love that.
You can also check out Courage Philippines, of course. They are on Facebook.
And Courage Philippines. So meron din silang Facebook page. So,
great. Yeah. Thank you again to everyone who joined us today on the podcast. And if you guys want to get in touch with us for anything, our email address, thenarrowdoorpodcast@gmail.com. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.